Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll masech the Zevachim daf Samach Tes. We are going to be on Samach Tes Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top with the words Omer Rav Yitzchak. So we were learning in yesterday's daf. We had the Mishnah that said a basic rule that if something is going to be fine when it went into the Azara, and then there's some other issue to make it possible, then we say at least it removes what's called tumas beis habliya. When it comes to a kosher bird, which becomes a nevela, so the din is that it doesn't take upon itself tumas maga masa. It's only when you actually eat the food, which is being matama beis habliya, means when it goes down your throat. That's when there's a din tuma. But if you're dealing with, for example, the Kohen uses his left hand, or it was done at night. So since these are actually avodos that sometimes do work, like on Yom Kippur, you can use the Kohen Gadol uses his left hand. At night, we do bring the fats and the limbs onto the Mizbeach. So we say that it takes upon itself that it is removes tumas beis habliya. And we also mentioned when it comes to malika. Now, even though, of course, a Kohen is supposed to do the malika, but since a non-Kohen, if he does the shechita, it's okay. So he said, well, maybe it's okay when it comes to a zar. So it's actually a machlokas when it comes to a zar, whether it's matama, tumas beis habliya. And the question is, what does the word kol come as a reboy? And then the Mishnah said that no matter what, if we're talking about the bird and also chatasov, which needs to be done with malika, with the fingernail, if you would use a knife, then that doesn't do anything, which means that it will, with divrei hakol, you'll still matama beis habliya. So those are the different basic opinions. And now the Gemara continues. Maybe it's a shemati shtayim. Achas, I heard two things. Achas kamitzas zar. So again, when it comes to the mincha offering, obviously the Kohen is supposed to do the kamitza. Even though we say the kamitza is somewhat like shechita, and again, shechita is kosher mazar, but the kamitza obviously is not supposed to be done by a non-Kohen. V'yachas malika zar. And there was another one regarding the malika of a non-Kohen, which again, so it's similar to shechita. Now, achas tered v'achas lo tered. Now, both of them are possible, and both of them you shouldn't put on the mizbech. But the question is, if we say im olu, if it goes up, do we say that lo yordu or yordu? So we saw in the Rashi, the second wide line, it says, even though someone who is pasul, who does the malika, and of course the malika becomes pasul, nonetheless there's no tumah beis habliya, because we hold shim olu lo yardu, that if it does go up, it doesn't go down. So the question is, v'liya dana. However, I'm not sure which one's which. So Omer Chizki mistaber kamitza terid. It makes sense that if it was done the kamitza by a non-Kohen and it goes on the mizbech, that has to be taken down. However, malika lo terid. However, when it comes to the malika of a non-Kohen, if it's put on the mizbech, lo terid. So my shna malika. So why? Why would you think by malika we say im olu lo terid? Because the yishna babama. Because as we saw in yesterday's daf, there when it comes to the shas heter habamos, a non-Kohen is allowed to bring karbanos on a bama. It's not required. There's no din of kahuna by a bama. So therefore, since the din of malika would still apply on a bama, but a non-Kohen could do malika there, so too he could do there as well. To the extent, not that you can, but at least im olu terid. But kamitza, so 1 second, kamitza nami yishna b'bama. What are you talking about? You could bring a mincha also at the time of bamos too. So, and apparently non-Kohen could do that too. How's that an answer? It's the same thing. The maybe not. Ein mincha b'bama. So then maybe you should say, no, maybe there's no such thing as we don't bring a mincha offering on a bama. So ein ofos not. So ofos nami. Ein ofos nami b'bama. So I'm not sure if this is the right lashon. I don't know if there's a different girsa, but you could say the same thing by bama. So maybe we didn't bring birds on a bama. So it's the same thing. pick your side. Either they both existed on the bama or they both did not. We're not allowed to be on the bama. So my taima, why would you say this? Is Zevachim lo menachos. It says by a bama that what was allowed to be brought on a bama, and this is V'yikra Zayin v'yishlach es nari b'nei Yisrael v'yalu oilos. It says that these narim brought olos v'yizbechu zvachim shlamim lahashem parim. So we see that they brought these karbanos, but it says zvachim, only a behema, which comes to obviously exclude. It's coming to exclude a mincha. So zvachim ofos. So ema ein kiddush b'kli sharis b'mincha b'bama. So what does this mean? So Rashi says, let's see if Rashi says anything here. In kiddush kli sharis b'mincha b'bama. So there's no, you can't be mekadesh with a kli sharis, a mincha on a bama. Hilkach lo yalfinan zar b'mikdash. You can't learn out le'inyan kemitza mizar b'bama. Now, even though let's say a mincha was brought on a bama, you can't compare the two. The lo dami ha'kemitza ha'kemitza. They're totally different. Why? Because the b'mikdash hoyev kitch b'kli sharis ifsul bazar. When it came to in the Beis HaMikdash, it was necessary to have a kli sharis, and that certainly a zar is not allowed to have a kli sharis. That's already like Kabbalah, and that definitely a non-Kohen can't do. But when it came to the bama, in the times of the a bama, even though if a mincha could be brought, but there was no kli sharis, basically you can't compare the two. Question 10. Lamandi abed malika bazar lo tered. Hoyel v'yishna bazar b'bama. Ma'ishna kemitza bazar detered lo yalfinan. Fine. So he said the lo dami kemitzas mikdash lo kemitzas bama hoyel v'kidja b'kli sharis islo bazar. Now we should also not just end this quickly, but also remind ourselves on the previous daf. We said mebama lo yalfinan b'mikdash dibama kechoyel hi legabe mikdash. So again, whether or not you can bring any rise from a bama, that itself is a question that stands on its own. Okay. Now just make sure you don't have any questions over here. No. Okay. So malt bismol obelayla. So we said l'divrei hakoil that it does remove tumas beis habliya. Namely, even though it's not a good shchita, even though you use your finger, but you are either it was done with your left hand or it was done at night. So therefore, we say it's puzzle, but it's enough that because we're talking about an oaf tahar, so the din is it's only it's not matam magamasa, but rather only when you eat it. So tanaban yochel tehei malika shehei lifnim matam b'bilgan mesabliya. So let's go slow. Let's look at this other part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if let's say, not only if you did malik with a knife, then it doesn't do anything. So if you're molak chulin bifnim, or if you do malika with chulin, so the truth is it doesn't matter if it's bifnim or b'chutz, either way it's not going to do anything because there is no such thing as malika when we're talking about chulin. By just a person wants to eat some empire chicken, whatever it is, so which is chulin, you can't do malika. It has to be done with a knife. The only time we say that there's a concept of malika is only by kachim, by also by chatasov, for example. So that definitely doesn't work. And then it says v'kachim chutz. Now kachim obviously are supposed to be done inside. If you did shchita, which is proper, with kachim, of course you could do that, but you did it outside of the proper place. And then it says also with the birds, which were not of the right age, or if there was something wrong with the bird itself, so then it's matama beis habliya. Okay, so that's maybe enough that we need to know. So, Yochol Tehe Malika Shehe Lifnim, you would think that if you did Malika inside, which you're supposed to do, is Matama Begadim Abeis Abliya, would be Matama your clothes that you're wearing when you eat it. Talmud Lemer Nevela. So what does it say? It says, V'chol nefesh asher toichel nevela. Anyone who eats a nevela, it says toichal, be'ezrach v'gerev v'chimis begadov. So you have to wash your clothes. V'rachas b'mayim v'tami ad ha'arev. So, the tahir. So, we see straight from this pasuk in Vayikra Yud Zayin that when you eat it, that it's matama, the clothing, and you have to wash your clothes. So what do we see from here? So, again, you would think, and that's talking about someone who ate a nevela. So you would think maybe if you did malika lifnim, it's also matama begadim abeis abliya. Talmud Leimer nevela. So nevela. So ha nami nevela he. So the question is, okay, it was done bifnim, right? Kashim bifnim, but it wasn't done again properly as some of the other cases we said before. So it's also nevela. So why maybe that's also should be a problem if it's a nevela, even though he did malika lifnim, right? But again, it was done with your left hand or at night. So why do we say it's not matama beis abliya? Again, it's a nevela because you can't eat it. It's a nevela, so l'char it should. So elo Talmud Leimer treifa. The fact is, it also says a treifa. Now, a treifa is an animal that you did the shechita and everything was done properly, but has something wrong with it that it's going to die in the foreseeable future because of its defect. Let's say there's some sirchais and it's in reya in the lungs. There's something wrong with it. There's some holes in it, and it's going to die. So it's a treifa. So a treifa also has the capacity of matama begadim abeis abliya. So ma treifa shin materes as iser, avkol shin materes as iser. It's only because a treifa doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter something which is usher. You can't eat meat while it's alive, and then once it becomes a treifa, it doesn't accomplish anything. So it's only when you don't accomplish anything do we say that it's matama abeis abliya. Yatz malika shi lifnim hoyel v'hi materes as a iser. It is mater the iser and matama begadim abeis abliya. So what does that mean? So if we look in Rashi, it says v'nefesh asher ta'achal nevela v'treifa. V'nelos of tahar, right? Well, of course, this is talking about a kosher bird, and it calls it a treifo. So why does it have to add that? So there's a lengthy Rashi over here. So v'hamas nisin lekamei is krameir di isle shchitas of tahar mitaharis treifasai metumasai. It says that it removes the treifa from its tuma. V'lo darish le l'haikra l'havi treifa sheshachta shetitame. Hilkach darish le miyute malika shehi b'fnim. If you do malika inside, v'shchita shehi lifnim. Umashma le. Okay, so ma treifa. Let's get down here. Ma treifa ein treifus ha'ma'oida ba mater shom iser. Doesn't do anything. Shehi ba midchila. Just like before, you couldn't eat it. There's no heter before. So too when it comes to any nevela, that it doesn't actually accomplish anything. Yotzin nevelus habol alidei malikas pnim, excluding when it comes to this case, that you did the malika inside, the hechsher, but only it was at night or something like that. Hayul umater se'iser. What is it mater? Shemachaya lo haysaroya likarav ligvoa v'hoter b'malika zu. Right? So in all these cases, as we said, because im olu tered, right? So because of that, we see that it actually must accomplish something, right? So since it does accomplish something, therefore it removes tumas begadim abeis abliya. That's how we understand this. Yatsa malika shilifnim hoyel v'hi materes es iser, right? again, we say lo tered. That's what we're talking about. Okay. Hevi hamoilik katz chavet simon kodshim b'chutz. Let's say you have kodshim outside, which of course is a no-no. Umoilik chulin ben bifnim ben b'chutz. So kodshim can never be brought outside, so it's problematic on the go. And chulin can never do malika with. Hoyel ein matir nes iser, since it doesn't accomplish anything because it's im olotered. If you would do this, okay, so that's the what we're basically saying here. Okay, Tanya iduch yochel tehe shchitas chulin lifnim. If you did shchitas chulin inside the kodshim, when it comes to kodshim ben bifnim ben b'chutz, you would think is matama beis habliya. Talmud learn nevela hanam nevela. So it's the same kasha. Nevela is matam gana beis habliya, but this is also these are also cases of nevela. El Talmud leimer treifa ma treifa shava bifnim kibachutz. Why don't we say it like this? That we compare the inside to the out. Avkol shavas bifnim b'chutz. It's only when the in and the out are the same. Yotza shchitas chulin b'bifnim. When it comes to shchitas chulin inside, kodshim or kodshim b'bifnim b'chutz, hoyavlo shava bifnim kibachutz, ein matam gana beis habliya. So b'shlom chulin, I can understand when it comes to chulin, lo shama mifnim kibachutz, that we're not comparing inside to out, because obviously chulin b'chutz is allowed, right? Chulin inside is not allowed. So that part of your point makes sense. Ela kodshim, when talking about kodshim, idib psulinhu. Understand? It's possible in either way. Look at Rashi. Shaychulin sheshaychlim b'chutz ein matam, and obviously v'afil shlo b'chshiron could go in oif treifa sheshachta. So it doesn't do anything. But when it comes to kodshim idi ben bifnim ben b'chutz nevei zu shava behem she'ein kan taras shchita. Right? If it's talking about a treifa, there's no shchita. You can't. It doesn't do anything. However, when it comes to chulin, if you would shecht a treifa chulin outside, so then it does not. It's not machshir to tuma. Right? That's what it says. V'fil shloi b'hachshirin can go in oif treifa sheshachta. Krameir de batahir treifas oif shchuta. So apparently, we see that there is a difference when it comes to chulin outside, which is a treifa. It does not. He's matahir treifas oif shchuta. But when it comes to a treifa kodshim bifnim or b'chutz, it's the same thing. Has no tyrus shchita. So el kodshim idib psulinhu. So Marava imo ilo shchita schutz. If the shchitas chutz outside helps enough, l'chayvo kares, that you could be chayv kares, which is talking about kodshim chulin, which is rather kodshim, which is shechted outside, right? Shchitas panim, okay, lo toyel lo tahira, so it should certainly work, right? So if there is some type of chiv kare, says Rashi, shchitas panim, the chulin hu denaflon. Okay, of a kodshim lo sarcha melch mina. We don't need to learn anything about kodshim. The mele naflon deloi matamu oifos kodshim shchutin b'chutz. We know that when it comes to doing shchita of kodshim outside, because we know that if you would take kodshim and you shecht b'chutz, you're chayv kares, right? Because it's considered shchutei chutz. Right? So, because of that, we see that obviously it's considered to be some type of shchita, right? The fact is, there is some element of shchita when it comes to kodshim b'chutz, because that's why it's called shchutei chutz. It's still called shchita, right? So then you're going to be chayiv for it. So we don't even need any support to talk about when it comes to kodshim, because we obviously know that when it's done outside, that's what the reality is. Right? So let's see this again. Meaning so it says, Omer Rava im ha'ilu shchita schutz l'chayv kares, because it's schute chutz. So lo ta'oil lo tahara. So midi nevel ashkachan chutz panim. So midi nevela lo ta'oil lo tahara midi nevela. Okay. So it's like that's it. So ashkachan chutz panim menolan. How do we know when it comes to kodshim that's done inside of, which is a treifa that also removes the nevela? Hoyav lo shavo panim kibachutz, because it wouldn't be the same otherwise. So therefore, in order for it to be the same, so also just like by outside kodshim will remove it from tumas nevela, so too b'fnim. So yihachi mal kodshim b'chutz nami. What if you do malika? The same thing. Nami lo dahavish nami lo the lo shava b'fnim b'chutz. Because we know if you do malika inside, it's okay. Malika outside shouldn't be okay. But if therefore even doing malika on the kachim outside also should not be matam b'magan b'esabli. Some Rav Shimi Barashi done and davar shlo b'hachshiru medavar shlo hachshiru. We compare something which has no hechsher to another. They done and davar shlo hachshiru medavar shachshiru. Because again, if you do malika b'fnim, so of course it's allowed, right? Malika malika b'fnim is machshir. So you can't compare the two. We do compare, because we said, how about yaitse? If im olu tered, if it goes on his back, we don't take it down. Yaitse is kasher babama. So what do you mean? So we ask the same. Apparently we do compare. So tana azois tar so oil riva samachle. So we said over there, the truth is we learn out from Xeris Akasov. Okay. All right. Let's look at some questions here. Question 11. So let's get it down. Moilek kachim b'chutz. So there, yes, it is matama because it's malika. Okay. Moilek chulin bifnim also. When it comes to chulin, it's always going to be that way, right? When it comes to, rather, malika bifnim is of chulin is a problem. However, sheichet kodshim b'chutz, if you shech kodshim b'chutz, it's not, because it's considered shchute chutz. And sheichet chulin bifnim is also not matama tumas begadam abesa bliya. And the reason why we said is because we hold if you shech chulin bifnim, shechet chulin bifnim is also not going to be matam begadam abesa bliya. So, in short, you can just maybe remember it by malika. When we're dealing, a person does malika of kodshim b'chutz, so kodshim is supposed to be done inside. If you do malika of kodshim outside or malika of chulin inside, so then we say that it is matam begadam abesa bliya. However, if you did the shechita of kodshim outside, but you did the shechita of chulin on the inside, so then it is. So again, it says according to he adds karamer the shechita streifa tahara. Okay, so this is the distinction between shechita and shechita and malika, and basically the answer gives it away. It says brayse kramir the shechita streifa tahara, right? As long as you did the shechita, so that's matar. So therefore, when it comes to shechita, basically I have to remember that shita is that that's not matam begadam abesa bliya, right? Whether we're talking about chulin outside, chulin inside, or kodshim on the outside. However, if you're doing malika, then it's still going to be matam begadam abesa bliya. Okay. Question TA 19. Menayin loindin, where do we learn shashaychet oiv kodshim b'chutz, you do the shchitas ein matam beis habliya. And again, obviously, Rabbi Meir. It says, Misvara. Im ho'il lo shchitas chutz, this is what we said over here, right? Since it helps, let's find this, Rashi, since it counts, if you would take kodshim, and you would shecht it, and you would shecht it outside, it does something, you're michayim kares, right? Let's find this. Omerava im ho'il lo shchitas chutz l'chayvu kares lo toil lo tahara midi nevela. So that's this is what the Rashi says. Kodshim lo tzarich l'melav mina the memela nafgon the loy matame ofos kodshim shchutin b'chutz the im ho'il lo shchitas chutz l'chayvu of kares mishum shchuti chutz. Right, so fine. Alma shrita hi shema. So that's the answer. So the fact is, you're going to be chayiv by taking kodshim and shechting it outside. It's called shchuti chutz. So and you're going to be chayiv kares. So therefore, that should also be it accomplishes something. It doesn't accomplish a good thing, but it accomplishes something. So too, it'll remove tumas begadim beis habliya. Let's see if this is the same question. Exactly the same question. This is TB22. TB22 is on Psalm Testament Aleph. I wrote Besvara. She'im ein shum din. I don't want to say me'ila. Kares. Oz gam ein matam yizawonim. She'im chayiv kares mishum shchuti chutz. So therefore, oz gam ein matam yizawonim. Okay, that's the correct way of reading it. And let's move on. Let's see the next Mishnah. Says the Masisan, Molok. So let's say a person did Malika. The nimps is treifa. It turns out that the bird is a treifa. So what's the status there? Rameir holds, as we said before, when it comes to shchita, by a he's mataher treifas of shchuta, right? Which is right there, which is this Mishnah, right? So he holds that it's not, and we'll see through a Kal V'chomer somehow that even though it turned out to be a treifa, the reality is it still removes the tumah of tumas nevela. Samach Tesamad Beis. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Metama. So we have a machlokas. Okay. So Omer Rab Meir Kal V'chomer. I'll prove to you through a Kal V'chomer that if you do the shechita on an oaf tahar, and it turns out it's a treifa, that it does accomplish something and it removes the tumah. Why? Because im nevelas behema, we're talking about the nevela of an actual animal. Shematamba b'magva masa. We know that when it comes to a nevela, a carcass of a kosher animal, that if you touch it or you move it, you're tameh. You're matamba b'magva masa. Nonetheless, if you shechted it, shchitasim et taharis treifasim mitumasa. If you shecht it, then it no longer takes upon itself the status of tumas magma masa. It's only when you eat it, which is a treifa, in the status of a treifa, it's matama your begadim. So that's a din by behema. So it would stand to reason that nevel sa'of, that when it comes to a nevel of an oaf, she'ena mataba magma masa. So a behema that's a nevela, if there's tumas magma masa on a behema, but not by an oaf. It's only there's only a bird can be matama begadim only bebeis habliya when you eat it. Only then, but there's no din tumas magma masa by nevel sa'of. So Enudin should have shchitasim ataris treifasim atumasai. So then, Kal v'chomer, it should make sense that if you shech the bird, whatever, you did the proper procedure with a bird, was it malika, whatever, and then it turns out it's a treifa, that it should at least remove tumas. It should remove the din of it should remove its tuma. Now, ma'amatzinu b'shchita. So when it comes to the shchita shehi machsharta lachila, we know that when it comes to shechting an animal, if you can eat it if you shecht it properly. Umetaharas treifaso metumaso. And if you shecht it and it turns out to be a treifa, there's no din tumas mago mas on it. Afamuli kasai. Shimach sharta b'achila. If you do the proper malika, you could eat it. Let's say a chatasov. Titar treifos midin avail to masai. So it's this is the proof. This is Rameir's proof, right? That's Rameir's kal v'chomer. So therefore, that's what we should learn. So Rabbi Yossi Amar, what do you mean? Dayai. You should say dayai. Kinevelos behema shchitasa mitaharasa v'lo malikasa. So if you want to compare the shchita of a behema to an oath, so it should be nevelos behema. When it comes to the nevel of a behema, shchitasa matarasa, only the shchita v'lo malikasa. So how could you learn out the case of malika? Maybe you could learn that out by shechting the bird, but not by malika. So therefore, he holds that when it comes to the bird, you can't learn out this kal v'chomer. Okay. So Vilgan Rashi, the hoyel v'lo yolef oaf el mibehema. The only way Rameir is saying you can possibly say that if you shech the bird and it turns out to be a treifa, that the din is that it removes tumas nevela, it removes tumas besa blia, but you only learn out from an animal l'tar treifa mitumasa. So if that's true, then dailo v'nelios kanadain. So then you have to learn just like itself. It's only talking about shchita, so it should only here be talking about shchita, but not malika. So Rameir lo darish daya. So this is a little bit perplexing. The Mishnah ends there, and it seems like Rameir is like, well, okay, so what? But dayoi in a kal v'chomer, you can't make an extra leap when a kal v'chomer. Well, after all, Rameir lo darish daya b'ha daya deraisahu. You can't mess with a dini deraisa. Daya is a din is from the Torah. Famously, is quoted many times in Shas, and for some reason here it has to tell us it again. Desanya b'din kal v'chomer ketzad v'yomer Hashem al Moshe v'yavir kirak mefanaha halot tikalam shem shamim. So Miriam, and by the way, the Gemara says Aaron, but Miriam spoke lashon hara about her brother, and because of that, she was quarantined. Now the question is, how long should she be removed from the Machne Shechina, from the Machne Yisrael completely? So kal v'chomer l'shechina arba aser yom. Now, if it was that she, let's say, spoke lashon hara, just stam about some regular person, then that's one thing. However, this is l'shechina because she's questioning HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not just some stam person. So if a regular person would be 7 days, so we're dealing with questioning the whole essence of Moshe's relationship, panim el panim l'daber boy. So then it shouldn't just be a 7 day. Let's tack on more. But you can't. Right? So you can't learn out more than where you're learning from. So therefore, Miriam had to be quarantined for 7 days only. So we should say the same thing. That just because when it comes to the shchitas behema, the din is that typically if you would have a nevela, there's a din stam, a nevelas behema, there's tumas maga amasa. If you do the shchit, it removes its tumah. So too, when it comes to an oath, it should remove its tumah besa blia. But that's true if we're talking about shchita, but you can't then jump and talk about malika. So with Yossi, Barav Avin, Rameir Krashkach. Of course, he can't argue with this. It's solid in the Torah. So how could Rameir find a possibility of saying that the din should be also when it comes to this bird by malika? So, because he found a pasuk Kedarish. What pasuk did he find? So the pasuk in Vayikra Yud Aleph says, Zois Tarsa Behema. This is the law of the animal, and it says V'ha'oif. So it's interesting. It does link the laws of an animal to a bird. It says V'chol nefesh achaya haromeses b'mayim v'chol nefesh haromeses al aretz. So the Gemara asks, V'chi eza Torah shavsa behema oif oif behema. Where do we find the fact that we're linking behema to an oaf? So behema metam b'magva masa. After all, behema we know is matam magva masa. An oif is in matam magva masa. How could you compare the two? They're not the same. A behema, if it's a nevela, is a tumas magva masa. An oaf that's a nevela that dies, if you touch it, you're not tamim b'maga. It's only by an animal. Oaf matam b'gana b'esabliya. Behema and matam b'gana b'esabliya. When it comes to tumas b'esabliya, that's only by a bird. They're not the same. So how could the pasuk say zois tayras behema v'oif? So this is Rameir's question. El Loimacha, he says, must be the pasuk's telling you the following: Ma behema, just like as we said by an animal which we know, davar shemachshira lachila. Any way in which can makshir it to eat, which of course is with a sakin, with shchita, mitar treifas mitumasa. So if you would have done it that way, even though it turns out to be a treifa, the tumas magmas are removed. So af oiv davar shemachshir ba'achila, which in this case could include even malika, mitar treifas mitumasa. And therefore it's not an issue of dayoi, because he learns this pasuk to tell us that that's the din. That when it comes to an animal, how are you machshir it? Only with a sakin, only with shchita. So here it can be machshir with malika. So therefore it should also remove tumas beisabliya. That's Rameir's logic. For Rabbi Yehuda my taima, so Rabbi Yehuda, who disagrees and says that if you have an oif and it turns out to be a treifa, that it's still matam b'gana beisabliya, nothing changed. What is his reason? Krash kach v'kadarish. He also found the pasuk. You found the pasuk, I could also find the pasuk. And it wasn't so hard to find. It was only a few prakim later in Perek Yud Zayin. The pasuk says, "V'chol nefesh asher toichel nevela." Any person who eats, specifically a nevela or a treifa, be'ezrach v'ger, it says v'chimis begadav rachatz b'mayim v'tahar v'tamei ador v'tahar, which we quoted this pasuk before. So it's dafka by eating a nevela and a treifa. So what do we see? It's v'kadarish nevela of a treifa. So what do we see from here? So Rabbi Yehuda treifa l'menemra. Why does it mention a treifa? Why does it have to mention that? So if you eat a nevela, that's it. Why does it mention if you eat a treifa? So im treifa chaya hari nevela amura. If we're talking about it was a treifa, and it was chaya, namely had the capacity to live, it already talks about a nevela that dies. Im treifa eno chaya, if a treifa is not going to be able to live, hari b'chlal nevela. So the question is, what is the extra mentioning of treifa, basically? Ella, this is according to Rabbi Yehuda, well, havi treifa sheshachta shimatama. Shimatama. That if you have a treifa that you shecht, it will be tameh. So that's what he learns. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. So it's telling you, what do you mean it became a treifa? It means you shechted it, and it's still, you can't eat it. It says beferish that by a treifa, it says it's matal megan beisabliya. It says in the pasuk. So Emily Rav Shizbi El Miyata Dechsib, but the pasuk, let's see another pasuk. It says v'chelev nevela, v'chelev treifa. You're not allowed to eat the fats of a nevela or a treifa. It says yasel l'chol malacha v'oichelo sachlanu. Right. You can do it. It's not asur b'hana, but you can't eat it, right? So it says over there also. It says nevela and it says treifa. So hasam nami name, should we say im treifa chaya? If a treifa can live, har nevela amura. So it says it's like a nevela. Im treifa ino chaya, if it can't live, sorry he b'chlal nevela. Now will havi treifa sheshachta. Maybe we're talking to include a treifa that was shechted shechel b'tahar. That its chayil is tahar if you shechted the animal, mechlal shehi matama. It sounds like, therefore, it can become tummy. It says, "V'chi yomus mina behema asher hi lachem la'achla." If, let's say, an animal dies, there's a nevela, hanogeh b'nivlasa yitmo. We know if you touch a nevela, you're tamei. That's what the pasuk says. V'chi yomus mina behema mixes behema matama mixes behema in a matama. So what does that mean? So some do, some are, and some aren't. So some are and some aren't. So ve'eza zuzu treifa shishachta. So maybe you're talking about if you shechted it, that there's no longer an issue of nevela, ella of touching it. Ella treifa meboilim yute tameya. So what is it coming to exclude? Treifas tame mishesh b'mina treifa yatzazu shein b'mina treifa. So says Rashi. So chel nevela v'chel treifa yasochol malacha ba'kasol ashmeinu. It's coming to tell you al chel nevela she'enu matama. It says apparently you're saying that it's not matama. But magma masa, right? It's only when you eat it. So treifa loma nemra. Im betreifa shemeis medaber. If we're talking about a treifa that died, so im treifa chashuv chaya, if a treifa is considered to be alive, so it's like a nevela, right? So what's the difference? Ella must be, as Rashi says, havi treifa sheshachta shechel b'tahar. Avo habasar tamei. Doesn't mean what the basar is tamei, but the meat, the fat is tahar. That doesn't make any sense. Ella Hai treifa, says Rashi, maskana de kushi. This is the end of the question. Klemer. El karchach, hai treifa, when we talk about the treifa, lo tidrushe lo hachi. It can't be coming to teach us this. There's no way to say it's coming to exclude the tameya that the chaylev is not, is she'en chel b'tahar. Hachinami treifa the ksiv gabi tumas beis abliya lo muti oif tamei. It's just coming to exclude a non-kosher bird, right? That's all it's coming to tell you. It's talking about a non-kosher bird is what it's coming to exclude, right? It's not talking about something which is the min, which is a kosher bird, but it's just a treifa, okay? So it's not coming to include that. So it's not coming to talk about that. So ezazu treifa sheshachta ella treifa meboilim yute tameya. Mishesh b'mina treifa, right? It's like a kosher bird itself, but it's possible it can become a treifa. Yatzazu she'ein b'mina treifa, which, right? So hachinami muti oif tamei she'ein b'mina treifa oif tamei. So that's basically Rabbi Yehuda is incorrect to learn out that it's talking about treifa sheshachta. Rabbi Yehuda medevela nafki. So Rabbi Yehuda. The sign you would think, says Rabbi Yehuda, that a nevelos of tame is matame besabliya. Talmud learning nevel v'treifel yoichel. Mish yisuru mishum bal toichel nevela. It's only there's the issue of eating it as a nevela. Yatzazushi yisuru mishum bal toichel nevela and mishum bal toichel tame. So there's a over there. There's no din if you're talking about an of tame, a non-kosher bird, right? A non-kosher bird, he learns that out elsewhere. That a non-kosher bird that is the nevela, it will not be matama besabliya, because it's only time there's a tuma of besabliya is something in which otherwise you would be able to eat, but it's just you can't eat it because it's nevela, as opposed to non-kosher bird, which you could never eat, right? So therefore, because of that, it's already telling you when it comes, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we already know the din of not being able to eat a non-kosher bird, or we know that you can't eat a non-kosher bird ever. So therefore, it doesn't fall under the category of when it's matam begun mesabliya. It's only something which is shaykh that sometimes you could eat, sometimes you can't, right? However, when it comes to a treifa or nevelis, of a non-kosher bird, there's no din tumas b'adam b'mesabliya when it comes to that. So therefore, what do I need this pasuk of nevela treifa to tell you? It's coming to tell you that even if you did shchita on a bird and it was discovered to be tamei, in that case it remains the tumas beganim beis habliya. Okay, just like the status of a nevela, so too if you do the shchita and it becomes a treifa. So again, the question is, how do you learn this pasuk? Is this pasuk excluding a non-kosher bird, or is it coming to include a treifa, a bird that you found to be a treifa? Okay, so ayin aleph. So hainami typically, this also, when it comes to chaylev tameya, right? You should also be able to learn out from the following pasuk. It says mevachela nevela. So mishi yisur mishum bal ta'ichel chaylev. Only a kosher bird, a kosher animal, which the prohibition is you can't eat its fats. But while bal ta'ichel chaylev nevela, you can't eat it because it's nevela. Yotzazu she'en yisur mishum bal ta'ichel chaylev nevela. So you can say the same thing, el mishum tameh, right? It's just a non-kosher animal, if you will, right? So you could say the same thing, that you shouldn't be able to learn it out there either. El hai treifa maboil yisui chaya. Maybe it's just coming to include a chaya. Sachadat hamina mi shechalba aser b'sar mutter yotzazu shechalba b'sar mutter kamashmulan. So we know that the isser of eating chaylev is dafka by a behema, but not by a chaya. So when it comes to, you would maybe think it's coming to exclude a chaya because it's only telling you when it comes to the status of the chaylev, when we're talking about something which is, chaylev is generally aser, right? So therefore, maybe in that situation, it's going to affect these laws. However, when it comes to a chaya in which me'ikar hadin, the chaylev and the basar are both mutter, so maybe you would think the difference, there would be a difference. Says Rashi, Mishnuyihi. This is an answer. It's including a kosher, like a deer, for example, shemesa, that it died, shechel b'tahar, that's coming to tell you that its chaylev is tahar. The salka daitoch, you would think, the ochol v'oisachluhu, ksiv b'haikra, mi shechel b'aser b'sar mutter, tihar telachal chel b'mechal nevela. Maybe in that situation, its chaylev, it doesn't fall into the category of nevela just because normally it is usher to eat. But avol chaya shechel b'mutter, the chaylev has the same status by a chaya as the basar. Indian nevela nami atamik kibsara, and therefore maybe you would think just like the basar is tameh, so too the chaylev is tameh. Kamashmuan treifa kol sheish meminu treifa vivil chaya. It doesn't make anything which can become a treifa, and of course a chaya can also become a treifa, so therefore that's included. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's look at question 12. Shchitas of treifa, which is our Mishnah, omolikas of treifa, te'im taharis metumas nevela. So, gimel shitas b'davar. According to Rab Meir, it doesn't make a difference if it's shchita or even malika. We said from a kal v'chomer that it always removes tumas beganim beis habliya. Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't. The tuma remains. Tuma remains. Malikas of treifa. And according to Rav Yossi, shchita mataharis of a lo malika. So Rav Yossi says the shchita will work, but not the malika. Okay, so it's a three-way machlokus when it comes to shchitas oaf. You do the shchita of an oaf, or the malika of an oaf, and you found that it's a treifa. Is a matamatumas nevela? So Rameir says it always is. Rabbi Yehuda says it never is, even by shchita. And Rav Yossi says it depends if shchita does work because of this kavachomer, but dayoi, and not by malika. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're not going to see that. Molok v'nimsas tray for a mayor metaher. Afal sheposel af sheposel carbon. Ezu oid malikas of What other malik of a bird puzzle with carbon? Mikol makom atahir ameir midin nevela. We didn't do that yet. Adkan.